Good morning.
Municipal Building Committee meeting. It's Friday morning, the 19th, 7 o'clock. And we have on the agenda for us discussion and presentation of the warrant and special town meeting. So that is the sole item on the agenda. Mark's not here. I'll take some notes. Jeff Shaw is not here because on vacation. And there we go. So, I guess we'll start with just a quick overview of the schedule of proceedings and then figure out, think back and figure out the details. So, yeah.
And I think we've got Marshall from the Finance Committee, and as I recall, when the warrant article comes up, typically the Finance Committee is going to make a presentation on financial impacts, options, and the like. And I think that's really informative for town meeting members. So are we thinking of focusing more on function or at town meeting or detail of what's being presented?
The warrant gets read.
Yeah.
Is there a selectman that's going to stand up?
I'm going to be reading the warrant, and then I figured I would give some lead-in to introduce the article. But that was part of what I wanted to talk about today was, how much should I do as presentation directly after reading the article before we have Jeff present the actual proposed building.
Yep.
And so
So if you lead in with the reading of the warrant,
yep.
You have a couple sentences after that to preface the warrant. I guess I would stand up and just introduce the Municipal Building Committee and the progress to date, and inform everybody that we went through the process of hiring an OPM, and we hired an architect, and we have the architect and the OPM here, and the architect is going to give a presentation on the proposed option and work to date. At that point, if we then go through the project, is there follow-up, Marshall, then on cost? Because we just would like to roll this out in a nice, organized manner. We'd like to.
Sure.
We have.
We're set with cost and what it would, the impact on the average taxpayer, with the proviso that we're running at 5%, and then I also have some
Current market rate, or?
Well, it's actually a little high. We may be able to do better than that, but we figured we'd do the most conservative impact to the taxpayer, one, and two, prepared if you think it's a good idea to talk about capital budgeting and the fact that the town has a capital base, and because of that there's a capital budget that is either the repair or replacement of capital items, and that we should be looking at that as a necessary part of the budget of the town. And historically we have done that through debt financing, not the only way that's possible, but that is the way that we have chosen in the past because our finances have been so tight with operations that we haven't had extra money to establish a capital budget, capital fund. And then as questions come up, if they come up with to the financing, we can speak to that. So.
Okay. Is there?
One thing, I think what's been helpful even to me in the past when we looked at these things was, I want to say it was back in 2008 or 2009, and actually you had put this together, Marshall, about our current debt service as a percentage of our annual operating budget, and we were operating at around the 15%. If my number, my mind is...
It's early in the morning, right? I understand.
Yeah, well, I'm my second sip of coffee, but...
Yeah.
But certainly we had targeted a debt reduction going from 2013 to 2020.
I have the debt reduction picture right here, which I would be happy to share with you.
That percentage of debt was kind of a dog whistle for me when we did it the first time. We were at the top
Yeah, we
end of it.
and we have reduced that debt considerably. With the financing for this project, we will come up to less than 1/2 of what that debt service was back then, in actual dollars, not adjusted dollars. So, and I have a slide for that.
Okay.
Right. So one is the metrics of the project, the cost of the project, how that is handled. Still seems we have people asking questions about taxes and whether it's a tax increase or whether it's a debt service override and what that all entails. And then there's town financial health, means and methods, and financial operations, which, this is just part of town operations for a project. There is a big, the question just keeps coming up, and has come up always, that anything above 10 million just seems to be too expensive, and is the cost then gets separated from the actual product, so to speak. And so understanding, I think that's part of my job and Jeff's job, is to bring the program back in line with the budget and put the two together. It's big nut to crack, but it's a big project, and we don't have too many of these projects in town, but you did have the library, you did have the transfer station. Those were the most sizable projects in town, right?
Well, no, that's not true.
No?
No, because if you look at the infrastructure of town and the capital, actually our largest single item is our roads. But we've done them over time. We don't have to do them all at once. The difference, and this is what people, it's like kill them by inches versus all at once. And that's really what we're talking about, because when we talk about the capital needs of the town and the fact that we are going to be always needing a capital budget, there should be a capital budget, in my opinion, then this falls right in line with what we have as a percentage of capital. We have to either repair or replace our capital. We know it and are very comfortable doing it with roads. We do it all the time with our equipment, our trucks, our cruisers, our other equipment. It wears out, we replace it, we don't give it a second thought, really. Now we're doing it with all of the equipment for the fire company, the fire department. And so this is a normal part of what we do. Just we're seeing it all at once because this is something that's going to last, 30, 40, 50 years. And if you start taking it down in that regard, then this is normal capital expenditure and a normal capital budget, and it fits within the realm of the town. We're seeing a big number, and that's because since the last time we did a big number, the numbers have just escalated for a whole bunch of reasons, which everybody knows, because we all costs. So, but I will be happy to address those.
Jeff, 1 second. So in the overview of the town, is there a statement to be made about taxes? Just put the amount of this project in relative perspective to the taxes that we currently pay in terms of the amount of education, the amount of payroll, and then the remaining is basically other costs. And if this is assessed compared to that in terms of the total piece of the pie, people get an understanding that this isn't going to double the pie or take up half the pie. This is a piece of the overall pie, to put it in perspective.
Once again, this is where we come in. Okay, we're looking at 4%. And so we're actually
4% interest rate or 4%?
No. We're looking at
percentage of
4% of our operating expenses, annual operating expenses. And our present or our past debt service was more than that. So we are actually reducing our overall debt service. It's actually gonna go down further before it comes up to 4%. So we were considerably higher, we're closer to
That's an
8%.
important, fact to make this simply clear as possible, because that has been, that has been the premise that has been rolled out since I started, was the understanding that this timing, and we haven't been able to execute this in a timely manner, and so when someone stands up and jumps up and starts talking about interest rates and financing costs, yes, shame on everybody for not being able to focus. The time was 4 years ago to get that, the lowest interest rate possible, and I don't think any sound person would sit here and have a project all designed, put it in the file, and just wait for interest rates to go down in order to do the project. The interest rates are what they are, and yes, they do add costs, but it's back to this is the program, this is the facility services that we need to provide in order to get the services that we're paying for, and they have a cost to them. But to totally drive it by cost.
Well, there's another argument there, if I may. And that is that the town has been operating with one of the lowest tax bases, the tax rates in the area. And so there has not been extra funds. The alternative to this project of going out and borrowing, which is what we have done for our major projects, is to have a capital fund, or basically something that you salt away. The citizens have not seen fit to establish a capital fund for these kinds of projects so that we have a savings account. And so this is the way we have chosen. And if you want to change that, we have to talk about futures at some point. Right now, that particular horse is out of the barn.
That's important to note, but that is a whole discussion for some other day.
Yeah, okay.
So that 4% you quoted is all of our debt, including
All of our debt.
this
All of
this
our debt,
project.
all of the debt service is going to go down. Yeah. When I say it's gonna go down, it's gonna go down. We were running about $1.8 million in debt service. We will be running with this project 800,000, rough figures, okay? We're gonna be a little less than half of what it was.
It would be interesting to see when we did the presentation back, when the original debt exclusion was passed, the slide from the deck, the presentation, here was a picture of the town when we brought this to the voters in 2016, and do the comparison, because I think it's really very important that going from 15% down to 4% is quite an accomplishment, and it showed really fiscal constraint on the part of the town and its leaders.
Is there an average, is there a threshold that the state says you're doing well in, or geez, you guys are a little over the 10%, the 11% mark?
I don't have that, I'm still working on that. I should have it by
Did you
Tuesday.
email us about the max debt that a town?
There's a
municipality
general
can
law
carry?
that limits the amount of debt that you can issue, but we're nowhere near that number. I want to say it's around 79 million or something like that.
Our comparison was all of our counterparts, where I want to say the average was 8 to 11%, and we were at the top end at 15. So I mean, I think that Essex County, we all kind of share the same needs and issues, so.
Jeff, you have a question before?
See if I can think of what I was gonna say again. I watched that Saturday presentation one more time last night. And, Eric, you really made it very simple at that meeting on Saturday. You were very good at that meeting. And I think there should be a layer of sophistication, but also a layer of simplicity at town meeting. I think if, like Marshall was just showing, to show the progression of where we've gone with capital debt and how we've handled capital debt. But I mean, if we think about things realistically, you know, I've been around a long time in this process. People should have almost realized when, you know, we got shut out of the highway bond and we had to re-shingle town hall and the police were downstairs, and if it wasn't for Bob fixing a lot of that stuff, with the fire station included, that we were gonna be in after about 80 years for some big capital outlays for basically, you know, the buildings that we have so long neglected. And I mean, thanks to Tracy and some of the other leadership with the finance committee and capital planning, we actually put the town budget together to be able to do it. Because back, was it 2009, Tracy? We couldn't even paint, we couldn't even paint our buildings, let alone think about anything else. So, I mean, if we have that layer of sophistication, and somewhere in the process, I'll get up as the main architect of the 6.5 and explain, you know, the process of how we, or at least I got there, and then it turned out to be when we had the architect come in and get into some of the, you know, planning needs and everything else, that it seemed that it was pretty hard to go forward with just that, and especially get town hall done. But I mean, like I said, sophistication and somewhat simplicity will do it at town meeting.
Speaking to the 6.5 question, I wonder if we want to speak to that before the presentation, because I know that's a big concern for a lot of residents, is how we moved from 6.5 to 12.
Agreed, it'll be good to clarify that, basically
Right off
how
the
we
bat.
got here and how we came to the realization that 6.5 just wasn't gonna do it.
So I don't know if we should go, instead of me presenting the article, speaking to it, and then turning it over to you, if we should instead go that I present it and then turn the mic over to Jeff temporarily to talk about that transition, and then go to you.
Yeah, it would be good to have any statements from the Board of Selectmen in an organized way. And then when you've said it, then I can pick up what the Municipal Building Committee did and what we were charged and what we brought back to the Board of Selectmen, which is what's brought to the town. And in order to explain that, the person that did the work is the architect.
And I thought about that a little last night too, and especially listening to Marshall and the presentation that's gonna follow. And let's think about this. If Damon spoke to the article, and then Eric, if you ever get a chance to look at the Saturday meeting, your presentation was succinct, simplistic, and relatively short about the process. And then after everyone, I'm not saying glazes over, but everyone listens to the detail, would it be more efficient if at that point I got up and explained how at least I pegged the figure and got there? So that's something that I haven't been able to, whether we start right out with it, I'll let Eric give a quick history, and then I can humanize it and put it back into, so that's, I don't know what's the best.
No, that is good, because then once you speak of the cost difference, and if Jeff speaks to the project, he's gonna go through and explain the site, he's gonna go through and explain the building, and then he's gonna go through and explain the cost, program.
Every time you say Jeff, I think it's me.
Yes.
Okay. The architect, the design team, the designer speaks to site plan and what that brings, building, what that brings, and the program, and a program comparison. They will have a basis for the 6.5. They'll have this project and the understanding of program and cost with it.
So, but what did we decide? Did we decide it might be better to have like Damon and then Eric do the
Yeah.
short history, and then at the end, I really can get up and say, look, as a past chair and a person that picked the 6.5, this is what happened, and at least
I think
my
it's
understanding.
Part of the process, my ending piece of part of the process is to, you know, to let everyone know how the 6.5 project, what that represented, what was in that, and what is it, and then bring them forward. So we will explain that, and then we will present the project at hand.
Yeah, I think getting the 6.5, because I think that is one of the biggest concerns for people is how we move from that number to the current project
Mhm.
number. I think get that out there right away. So I think if I present, you present, so then the project is being presented on essentially a clean slate. People aren't sitting there going, how did we get there? We've already given them that information. I think it can hopefully be heard better at that point, is my feeling, but I don't,
So you're thinking you, me, and then Eric?
yes.
I don't have a problem with that.
And also not to get, sorry, Bob,
Yeah, no, but-
not to get lost in it. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Good.
All right.
I was thinking
Make it
it's a lot.
Makes me feel
Find it
better.
out, back up, yeah, yeah.
Back up.
It,
8:30, I'll remember.
the big question in the room is gonna be, we had 6.5, now we need 12. So I think addressing that first is, that's what's on everybody's mind. Okay,
I think
so-
it should be.
Okay.
Addressing that
but-
first.
And you jogged my memory, I think also what we need to clarify is an affirmative vote on this nullifies the 6.5. I think the notion is still out there that a positive,
There you go.
that a positive vote somehow
Yep.
allows 18 million, and that's not the case.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So we have to be sure not to lose
I
that.
can do
When
that.
Selectman Jesperson reads the motion, at the bottom of the motion, it specifically addresses that and rescind the vote taken at the January such and such town meeting for 6.5 million, so it's clear.
I think that message hasn't got out there as well as.
I think after Marshall goes and there's a summary before the vote, it could be said again. I think, reading the warrant, everyone's reading the warrant, but the types of language in the warrant isn't just as simple as saying.
We can clarify that in our presentation.
I mean, one thing that I think people, at least for me, it was an awakening when it seemed the way things were falling together with program needs, that the 6.5 was barely gonna maybe build a police station, and then everyone jumped on board, well, let's just build a police station, we'll do town hall later. And that, to me, it wasn't acceptable, because the original vote was to do both. So, that's just how things changed in the last 3.5 years.
We had a program, we still have the same, similar, close to number in terms of square footage program, but we didn't have all the costs because we didn't have the plan.
Especially contingencies and all the
And
other
the
things.
plan advanced, right, and as part of the budgeting process to get the budget down, there were, things had to be cut. And I guess that's the simple storyline is that we did start off with a project and a budget, and we kept whittling it down to smaller and smaller and smaller.
To fit the
And
6.5.
as you whittle it down, we weren't advancing drawings. We had a budget, we had one plan, and I kept slicing and dicing that in order to create a project that was less and less. And it wasn't apparent that night, as I look back on it, to say, you definitely can build a police station for this, but what's ever left over, it goes to town hall. And that what's ever left over is just undefined at the moment. And it could be as much as a small addition in solving the accessibility needs, or it could be, it could be a coat of paint, or it could be a new mechanical system at the most. And that wasn't clear.
I think one of the big things is going to be breaking down the 12 million. Because, when you look at it, if we're going to be building 18,000 square feet, using that as our, gross number, that comes in about 8.1 million on true construction cost at 450. Then certainly we have our design, OPM, but I think there's confusion on what the contingency, as I recall, it's $1.2 million. What is that for? And the same being, we're carrying, I think, $750,000 for furniture, fixtures, electronics.
Yep.
And the same thing for relocation of the PD. So that $2.5 million is a conservative reserve where, in all reality, I'd be shocked if we spent half of that.
So
But for budgeting reasons and for full disclosure, it's good, but
Yes, and so those numbers from Vertex and Context are numbers that they typically see put into the projects. And as you and I know, the contingency's there for what ifs, that is just part of the process, that things come up, stuff happens, and the process of having a design, giving it to people, having people come together, especially in the public realm, of how the bid process works, and then doing everything exactly the same doesn't quite work.
Right.
And there's risk and reward in that, and so you have to cover for certain things. The furnishings number is in there because nobody's sat down and actually done the work, so we're using percentages to fill a line item in which to be conservative to make sure we're covered. And we've already said that we're bringing most of the furniture and the tables and the chairs to the new place. And we've talked about using Nintendo. We've talked about your new reused, new dispatch that you're bringing over. You might need a few upgrades, but you have it. We're not planning a line item for a totally new technical package of brand new spanking everything.
Our radio system's new, things like that.
So I think it's something, we need to say that, and that clarifies that those numbers are placeholders, and that's how you get to 12.
Yeah, it might be kind of nice if even Jeff can speak to that, because he is the architect in a professional way without too much value or emotion, because that was one of the things as a layman and maybe an unsophisticated person, when we kind of put together the original 6.5, and then we ran into the architect and the OPM, and we got program needs, and we got, maybe needs that were here, and we whittled them down, but still all of a sudden, out of the air, you put $1 million on for this, and you put FF&E on, and, wow.
So what
that
happened?
blows the budget pretty quick.
What happened there is, I think, looking back at all the reports, is that the effort to select the site and the effort to equalize the site selection with the simplified budget so that we could say, here's the governor's project, here's the Route 1 recycling, here's the holistic health, here's the town forest, here's Morgan Ave, was that the budget needed to be simplified so that you can see which of the sites had an extra cost or which of the sites had a lesser of a cost in order to do it. But the full budget wasn't baked into a total complete project for each one. It was always water and sewer, and it was cost of site, and it was cost of temporary facilities. And those three line items then created the site selection from, the site at Governor's is free, but by the time you dig down the road through the ledge to get to their little sewer treatment plant, you've just added twice the sewer cost than just extending the sewer from to Morgan Ave. So that wasn't apparent, and people were all excited about free property, but the free property actually had more expenses attached to it. And then you had costs for JRM, is that right? Yeah. Site, but you were then into costs for sewer and water from Newbury, cross train tracks and stuff like that. And so that site had a certain cost to it. Town forest was free, but we brought the Board of Health out there with the DPW, and we did our perk test. We couldn't even get it to perk, and then we were starting to compromise the system for a mission critical building of what we could do for a septic system, even though that was the center of town. So in those budgets, we didn't overinflate the contingency as a number that it probably should have been, because it in my opinion, would have been distracting to the whole of what separates the project. So, you're right, the contingency, we had some FF&E numbers, but, I'm not a interiors person that runs those numbers. I would use a percentage, and the percentage is then equal to each of those site projects. So it's just relative to the whole. That's how we got to some of these increases.
The difference today is the 6.5 was a construction number. It wasn't a not to exceed number. The 12 million that's being proposed now truly is a not to exceed number, where that $2.5 million that we're carrying in reserve, let's call it, could be at 50 cent dollars and not the full. So this could simply be a $10.5 million project and not a 12.5. I think the easiest way to compare it is the $6.5 million number that we used in 2016 equates to the $8.1 million construction number that we're typically using now. And sadly, it's all the other contingencies and add-ons that required that drive this.
I mean, it's almost, once again, what goes into building municipally. I mean, if you actually distill, you know, Bob's using strict figures, but, you know, the building is really almost a $9.5 million building. It's not really a $12 million building, but it's a $12 million building.
Project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the not to exceed budget, I think that's it. I mean, quickly, I did 18,000 at 450, which is the high end of a number for doing a combined facility, because the town hall component's probably gonna blend at 380, where certain components of the PD are gonna hit the 450, but.
I mean, it would be nice and easy to say, look, you're getting a $9 million or $9.5 million, 2 new buildings, when, yes, the 6.5, 3 or something years ago might have done the police station and whatever the town halls.
So
But
on
you can't really say that, I guess, because it's still a project cost.
July 12, 2016, we had options in front of us for conceptual site plan number 1, which is a new town hall and police station, 18,000 square feet, $9 million project cost, with soft costs being 0.5 to 1 million. So
Pretty close, huh?
Yeah, pretty close. And then after going through numerous iterations on number 4, we had our standalone police station with a small addition to town hall. And the project costs, in terms of this sheet, which is, I think, probably where I erred, it says 6.7 million to 9 million.
And that's CSS.
This is me taking CSS's
I got you.
information
Yep.
and slicing and dicing it and saying, if this was the combined police fire facility, and I take out the fire and I take the police and just put them down there,
So,
this is the information in hand. But it was 7, it's right here, it's total project cost 6.7 to 9 million. And, you know, we took 6.5. So we just went to the lower end of everything, and in that, the representation of actually what you get for the number was lost, because we were so focused on budget and not focused on.
and if you analyze exactly what you said, something's gotta give. And if the project costs are project costs, then you're gonna start to whack it off the building.
And costs and taxes are expensive, but this boils down to, we obviously have facility needs, and what do we want to do? Do we want to replace them with a brand building? Do we want to place them with the minimum building? Or do we want to just pick a number that we live with and only provide what we can come for that budget? And if that means you build half a building and you don't get a room, you don't get something, you don't get something, and then we just ask you to operate like that. And that I think has been lost in the budget. Everybody's so focused on budget and the number, and I can't get to 10 million, I can't, 6.5 to 10 million means taxes. But in reverse, we should all be saying, what are we building? What's the program, and what at the end of the day is going to be the spaces that we provide the police at the town hall to do their operations?
I mean, the question we're going to get certainly is, it's overcoming the 6.5. And you're going to have a presence at town meeting that's going to say, build the police station. You get 6.5, build the police station. And I think it's important to demonstrate and with clarity, by doing it 2 steps, what's the penalty to the taxpayer? What's our taxpayer impact? I think the good thing is our community recognizes we need work at town hall, we need a PD. If we split it up to follow that thought process that some may have, what's the cost down the road to go back into trying to do a town hall as a separate project? What's the penalty on that? Is it, you can almost say you're gonna duplicate all of your public bid process, the construction escalation, your design, OPM.
You're gonna have twice as
So-
many meetings.
Probably doing it as 2 separate projects, you start out with a punitive penalty of probably $1.5 million, plus the whatever the escalation in construction, and then whatever the escalation in interest rates. I think the interest rates is the real driver for me. if we had got this done a couple of years ago, that would have been great. Our taxpayer impact would be at 50 dollars on interest versus what it is.
Tracy's getting ridiculously low numbers at some point, and with the, is it FDA?
Department of,
Farmers Home Loan Administration.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
at 2 point something.
yeah,
So
2.6.
we all.
You would have
The
driven
fund
that.
rates were actually lower than that at the time, wasn't it?
Right, the
So
conventional
we thought we were
funding
doing
was low.
something great at 2.6, and Tracy was coming back at almost 2, and we were like, you know, that was the optimum, that was the moment to go to the market.
But to add to what Bob said too, the unknown in that factor would be, would town hall be built in 2 years? Or would this whole process start all over again, and would it take 4? We'd be 6 years down the road trying to get town hall built. And that's certainly a poor use of taxpayers' money.
And we're kind of assuming that we could build a police station for that amount of money. We've never gone through that whole design process to get a number from the architect on just building a single project.
Well, I mean, we have
We can make
a,
assumptions, but.
yeah, I mean,
8.1.
using
$8.1.
$450 a square foot, that certainly is the top end for that. We already got the other costs, but just being able to answer these questions with some clarity, and as Jeff said, I think in a very quick and simple fashion. If you split it up, what's the penalty?
And one of the other issues is that we had expected initially that renovating town hall would be cheap and dirty, and instead it's really expensive and dirty.
I mean, I think what's happened to town hall is looking through a little closer lens, what was gonna be more of a small addition and some renovation has become more of a complete rehab renovation.
Yeah.
Which has triggered looking at this combined facility.
Yeah. So I think that has to go out there as well, is that we couldn't simply tear down a couple of walls and put up a small addition. We had to sprinkle, we had to bring the whole building up to standard for ADA. We had,
Yeah,
you know, the expenses.
when you start
there
putting
were-
a 4,000 or 5,000 square foot addition onto a 3,200 square foot wood structure, where all the floor elevations are more of a residential application than a municipal. I mean, I think that's when the selectmen made that decision to go back to option of a combined facility.
And even when people were talking about 2,000 square feet, and we're like 67 here or something, and, you know, although, when it got to be a $2 million figure in an old building, it got hard to get to that process.
We were also replacing trailers at the exact square footage of the trailers, which again was another mistake
Yep.
by mine, because of the grossing factor that goes with corridors and roofs and other associated pieces of the building, that when they get enclosed and encompassed in a enclosure, you have hallways and things to get
Yep.
to. And
Wall
we-
space.
And we were
Wall
just simply
width.
just using that as a metric, because everybody could see and visualize the trailers, and they had an exact dimension, and so that's how that addition got brought forward, so that it was, you know, we didn't have, in sort of site selection, we didn't quite have the plans that, we had a plan that added it, but really it was, we just needed 14,000 square feet, or 1,400 square feet, sorry.
And I mean, we did the best we could. Eric just, I mean, for no money, was doing stuff that, I mean, and that's why towns like Essex, Merrimack, and Raleigh hire the architect first and get the plans out. I mean, right now, Essex is going through $650,000, and they're having the architect do 3 sets of plans on 3 separate sites, and it passed the town meeting. So, you know, Eric did the best he could. He never, the guy's making 600 grand, and Eric made nothing. So,
Well, I mean, I think we went from trying to be the most efficient and most cost-effective, but it started to fall outside the parameters of being completely functional when you got to the end of the project. And I think that's the revisit that's gone on.
Right, we did one budget, one programming study, and then we reused that again and again and again without sort of advancing it in thought. You know, CSS didn't come in, they looked at the police station at the time, but that was, even at that time, it was 2000, I got started 13, so.
Every round.
2012, 2013. So, you know, we dragged old information forward, and it wasn't like they were continuing to advance that. They, you know, they were hired on short money on allowable cost where their fees were, I don't know if they were less than 10 grand, Tracy, but, you know, that's the means. You could hire, in terms of the procurement laws, you can hire somebody for, I believe the threshold still is under 10,000 with a best business practice where Tracy can go out and make some phone calls and ask 3 people for a over-the-phone bid and then make a selection in order to move something forward without going through a huge public process for that minimal amount of service. And it was that was a little service.
Well, I mean, Eric, the proof is in the pudding, and the work you did that is exact, the 6.7 to $9 million, and the work you did right there. And I'm sure I was the guy that pushed the 6.5 out of 6.7. So that's exactly where it was right there, and that was because of political pressure. I said, what's the lowest thing we can do? But you had it right there. The perfect storm was right there. It was 6.7 to $9 million right there.
And you're right, in the discussion of the police station, town hall, and let's say, you know, and a fire station. And then there'll be schools, and then there'll be another fire station, and then there'll be, you know, maybe there's a fire station on Plum Island or something, but there are other projects that keep coming. And
Every municipality is going to have a certain percentage of debt at all times, because everything has a 20, 30 useful life. So I mean, you're paying off one thing, there's a whole list on the table that we need to start looking at and funding. So
we tend to wait until it is condemned. We tend to wait until the asphalt falls off the truck.
I think
before
we did.
realize-
I think we're doing a lot better on this. I think going back to Marshall, that we went from 15% down to 4%. So I think our comfort zone is going to be somewhere between 4% and 8%, which I think is what our counterparts
we are going to tell you what your comfort zone is going to be after we finish with capital planning and doing the calculations
Yeah.
of what it looks like, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, Newbury, for the first time, we actually can look over the horizon a little bit on what's coming up with equipment and capital facility needs and replacements.
Chief, do you want to speak to this project at all?
Well, I've been asked maybe 7 million times now. Chief, would you rather have a standalone police station or a combined police station? And my answer has always been the same. I just want a functional police station that's safe and suits the needs of the Newbury Police Department. My first responsibility is to the women and men of the police department to make sure they have a functional, safe building. Now, whether that's a combined building or it's a standalone, to me is irrelevant. I'm getting the same productivity and the same safety. But my second job here is to look out for the overall welfare of the town as well. And sitting in these committee meetings and sitting and talking to Tracy and the selectmen and the capital planning committee, it's really apparent to me, and I don't have a dog in this fight because I'm getting a new building either way, but it's really apparent to me that the most economical use of the taxpayer money is the combined facility. So I'm behind the combined facility 100%. Even reading the literature from the people that are against this project, the need for the police station is apparent. So I am thrilled, I'm humbled by the support from both camps. But I really do, I am really strongly behind this project. And, you know, in the end, I think it will be, it's a big nut to carry right now, but in the end, I think the taxpayers in town are gonna really be happy with it.
One question,
Yep.
if I may. Does the combined facility in any way compromise your functionality?
No. From sitting down with the architect and the I don't know, I'm not an architect, but the floor plan for downstairs and the accessibility around the back of the building, we're getting everything we need.
Okay.
And we've functioned forever with town hall above us. And there was some drawbacks, but that was facility related. That was because I couldn't sit in my office and have a conversation without anyone up in town hall hearing everything I said, so then we moved to trailers. You know, in a building like this, if it's designed and constructed to code, and, you know, we won't have those issues.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
But let's speak also to the fact there's the antithesis to that, and especially, and it's not, you know, super apparent, but the synergy of having all the facilities on that single site with water and sewer was very apparent when we spoke to her at that meeting at the library. And also many times when people were working late in this building, they wish you were still downstairs when they're leaving.
oh, well, I get it all the time. I get people that stop in the police station to see me, and I'm not in my office because I'm across town at town hall, or, you know, and it's, Chief, you're never in your office. Well, I'm at town hall, or, you know, those are the types of things, you know, with having town hall across town, it's just the reality of it. But having town hall right on the same campus, whether it's directly over our head or in a building 30 feet away, it's a lot easier for
And
everyone.
somewhat centrally located,
Yeah.
once again, would be good.
Okay. And Chief, we went through the process where you were re-interviewed, you gave them your full wish list.
Yes.
And that building, plus the full wish list for town hall, turned out to be 14 million.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we pared it
We
down.
then went back and set a budget of 8.5 million, took out the soft costs, and then showed you what you could get for that budget number, and you said that's unacceptable.
Yeah.
I don't have even the minimum spaces I need.
Right.
And then went back and added back what you thought was the minimum, and then we worked to try to, I don't want to use the word creative, but we worked hard to make those as efficient as possible.
Right.
So with those spaces that are on this proposed plan, as you just said, whether it's a standalone or whether it's under town hall or adjacent to town hall, that is the minimum.
That is the
program
minimum. Yep.
that you need. And so if anything, if there's anything less than that, you've said it before, it's not worth building.
I don't want to be the person standing behind and championing a building that I know is insufficient right when the ribbon is cut. I don't want to be that guy. So.
No one wants to be next to you.
Yeah,
Okay, so that brings it back to program. I think we've gone through the program. Jeff will speak to the program, but that's part of the process of.
Well, I wonder if we would, part of the reason I asked is because if you're comfortable speaking after the program is laid out and Jeff discusses the building, I think having your voice out there in front would be a very good thing.
I'm sure I'll get the question at town meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
Or somebody will stand up and ask, would I
What-
rather have a standalone police station?
What I would recommend is the town's presentation be short and sweet, and then all of us be prepared to answer questions that come from the floor, because it'll be overcoming that question from the floor will have probably a far greater impact on everyone that's at that meeting than glazing everybody over with FF&E and contingencies, because
Something at all.
it's not the language the average family speaks.
Now, the one thing I want to ask all of you, I'll get the questions from the people that are looking at the floor plan. Why do you need 400 square feet or whatever for a women's locker room? You only have one woman. You know, do you want me to stand up and answer those?
That's an architectural thing.
Right,
That's
those
custom and practice
minutia
and minimum
questions, or,
requirements.
I mean,
That's why we have contacts.
Okay.
That's why we have Jeff.
Architect.
Jeff has built and designed these before.
right,
He speaks to that.
okay.
It's his, you gave him the program, he fits it into the building. He understands that in terms of the arrangement of the building, that spaces grow and shrink because of certain conditions and where they're laid out within the plan.
Right, he knows the actual law as to,
Yeah, well,
by statute, what needs to be where.
Yes.
The questions, at least what I'm getting, except for like you just said, that will be answered by the architect for design of functionality and the, you know, site and the space planning. The questions I'm getting are the same questions we've gotten for a very long time. There's not many new questions. If you're gonna get drainage and spatial needs, that's gonna be the architect. of a new building.
Yeah, I think the reason I was wondering if the chief should talk first is because there are questions that we know we're gonna get, and sometimes I feel like it's better to answer
Eliminate
those
them.
questions. Just, we know we're gonna hit all of these questions, so we may as well, in our presentation, answer those questions. And I think the chief answers one of the questions very well in essentially those words. Doesn't take him a long time, but it helps to have it come from him.
I'll do whatever you need me to.
So any questions that we can answer of the returning questions, over and over and over again questions, rather than making people stand up and present them, we would say, we've looked at these questions, we hear them, we're listening, and we have answers.
Very good point.
Between Marshall and Tracy, then, who speaks to the possibility of other costs or other funds? Is that within your presentation? We've talked to our state representatives, and there's a
Okay, I think that's mine. And what we are doing is presenting a most conservative number. If we are able to get better rates, we can cut the impact. I looked at rates for every, basically for every percent we can cut, we cut the tax burden down by about $25 a year. And so we're prepared, I'm prepared to talk to that. Hopefully we'll be even more prepared by Tuesday. But, and as far as the getting grants, getting funding from other entities, we have not put that in because, one, it's not contractual, and so if you say something and you can't deliver it, you're a bad guy. If you don't say anything and you deliver something good, you're a hero. Which would you like? And so, if that question comes up, that's basically how I'm going to handle it.
It somehow should be noted, without any guarantees, that there is some process and some effort or additional efforts will be made, even the accepting of donations for the project, that would hopefully be made once we have a project and we can actually present it. You can't really ask for money until you actually have a project, but once you have the project, then you can take it to the representatives, you can take it to people, and you can try to whittle it down a bit.
Yep.
Can't we just leave it at we're exploring every opportunity for grant funding?
It just has to be said.
Yeah.
I think having it at not to exceed is the 12 million.
Right.
Is
Just
probably
because
the
we
most-
get 12 million doesn't mean we have to spend 12 million.
No.
If we get other sources of income, that whittles that
Tracy
12
I
million
mean,
has
down.
said-
Bruce's can't come in at a public selectmen's meeting and, stated that we're in the line item budget for $1.5 million.
$1.5 million in the economic bond bill.
And so that takes 3 to 4 years, but it's certainly reimbursable under the original figures. There's talk of a capital planning, funding, raising, going out to some of the people in our town that especially, and there's other people that are pledging money, so it's gonna be the choice of you guys right now, whether you wanna speak to any of those or just keep it.
I kind of agree with Marshall. I think all of the numbers that we discussed, both in project costs, annual tax impact, it's all a worst case scenario. And I think that's where we have to start. Everyone has to be advised that the most it's gonna cost you is approximately $275 if you're an average taxpayer. But we, all of the team here, will continue to work with our legislative delegation. We're gonna continue to try and pursue the Farmers Home Loan grant funding to see if we can perfect the lowest rates possible, and all of those opportunities. We're working with the Governor's Academy. They've again expressed their gratitude for all of the public safety services the community provides and want to partner with us on this. So we have opportunities, but I think we have to present it from, the most conservative
You've said
on
in
the
the
higher
past
side.
that the bond is actually rolled out as a floating loan in the beginning, and
Short
then
term
once
for 2 years.
the number's finalized, then that's what's actually rolled into an actual bond
Issue, yep.
issue. So that, you know, the construction cost based on square footage isn't real until you actually have a project that goes out to the street tells you what exactly that cost is. Hopefully it's lower at the time, and you know, we're not expending it. But somewhere in this presentation, that simply needs to be said, or the answer needs to be brought up at hand, because I think that is conceptual. People read 12 million in the paper and they think they're getting hit for 12 million, period.
I think that we've done a good job in covering the difference between the 6.5 and the not to exceed 12. I think another question we should be prepared for is, at the outcome of this meeting and the outcome of the ballot question, what is the timeline to get this underway so that we're gonna get the question, didn't we do this 2.5 years ago? Nothing got built because we didn't have kind of that, how do we roll out the schedule? How do we actually kick this off? So I think it's important that we actually, depending on the vote in November, if this endeavor is successful, what is the timeline? I think
Jeff Shaw
Jeff has
rolled
that.
that out.
Okay.
He'll say it's 6 months plus or minus the design.
I just think that would be helpful to have so that it will overcome that concern that, are we gonna lose another 2 years while
We're in
we're
a
trying to get
different
this put together?
place than we were.
No,
I
sure.
think it should be stated that we have an architect, an OPM, and a basic
Well,
plan.
Jeff will speak to that. He'll say, now that I'm on board, my timeline is once you approve this, I have 6 to 8 months of design, I have 2 months of going out to the street for the bid,
Yeah.
and that's 8 months, and so 8 months the shovel is in the ground.
I just think that it's gonna be a valid question, certainly.
We had to go through, and what took some extra time was the creation of the advertisements, the creation of the structure in which we were going to do the advertisements and the selection process. We had to build that process and approve that before we can actually then go through that process. It took a bit more time than I thought. It took a lot more time in committee
Oh, sure.
than
I think the other big thing is that we talked about this at several of our meetings about programming and space planning needs from a municipal government level versus institutional or corporate level. And I think it's a perfect example of how innovative and efficient ultimately we've become on our final plan. If we follow traditional municipal state space planning needs, you're at the 24,000 square feet. To be down to 18,000 square feet, that's being very innovative and very efficient. And it could become the pinnacle for future endeavors for these type of
And as
facilities.
it goes through the design process, we as a committee are still focused on following that through. We're not done just because this somehow passes. The committee needs to be the watchdog for the design, to keep that up and make every improvement and every efficiency that provides the end goal, but still pushes the concept that's on this drawing forward for maximum efficiency and thinking. And, you know, Jeff he's got a certain process, he's got structural, he's got mechanical, he's got codes, he's just got building materials and building envelope that he's thinking about, and there's a lot more to the process than that space plan that gets you to a real building. And I don't think anyone wants to, we keep hearing about the library, and are you gonna do another library again? And I think the point about the library, which you don't know the full story, but you know, the library had some issues, and you know, there are issues, and typically in construction, when you cut things down to the minimal, you end up shortchanging some of the assemblies and processes that it takes to build the building, and those deficiencies usually rear their head sooner or later in the building.
Plus, the town itself, we're far more sophisticated today than we were 10 years ago. I mean, just going from a 3-man board of selectmen to a town administrator approach to going to having a capital planning committee. We're just firing on all 8 cylinders today, so I find no criticism of how the library get built. I think they did a great job based on what
Not
skill.
I'm saying
But I think it's important to make a comparison that
as, you know, we don't trust you, we don't think you can do the right job. And the point is, it's not that we can't do the right job, folks, it's that we have to provide the facilities for the services that you want.
Okay.
And somehow or some way or some shape, it's gonna come. And I think through this process, and maybe it was just a proving point that the 6.5 is not gonna get us a town hall and a police station. And if you separate it, you can do a police station, you can do a town hall, you can do a fire station. Part of the large $14 million number, which was part of the process, was that building of the singular police station was arranged with a little extra space in it, so that when and if the fire department needed to be replaced, a third of the fire department was already built in the police station with 4 shared spaces. And the layout would accommodate a just simple apparatus bay, plus a few more storage rooms, but the meeting rooms and the toilets and the way the stairs and the elevator were all located were already duplicated, were already there because of the need of the police, and were thoughtfully laid out so that the fire could take advantage of it. So we were thinking ahead, and at some point in this town, you gotta stop thinking too far ahead, you gotta solve the problem that's on the table. Because the inclusion of the fire, and that is the site plan. When people argue now, I mean, they argued that in terms of the space, but in terms of the amount of parking you get, this is the most efficient plan of parking. And we're gonna have people that are gonna say, you know, you don't have enough parking on this site. Well, we have the most parking out of any plan, and we have a future lot that if we need to move a fire station without taking down a fire station, we have that opportunity.
It allows flexibility for even after we're all dead, for who knows what comes down the road.
And by the positioning of this building, we listened to one of their questions, which was a dangerous intersection and multiple entrances at short distance to that intersection, and we've solved that problem. We've also provided the town hall with parking for its front door and the police for parking for your, call it your front, it's not your front door, it's your back door, which is your back door, and you have a front door. So you have an identity to the community. The town hall is an identity to the community, the town green, the high road, and you have your back door that's necessary for the functioning of the police station.
But I think also too, what Bob just said is really kind of important. Not only, you know, the Board of Selectmen and Capital Planning and all the other boards and the Finance Committee and the town administrator, but, you know, our inspectional services are much more sophisticated. So, you know, we have a good architect, we have a good OPM, so we have a good team in place. And I think the town has to know that there's extreme checks and balances. We have a sophisticated building committee. So going forward, there are so many checks and balances and sophisticated intellectual processing to put the best building on the ground. And, you know, we're pretty sophisticated now, where maybe library time we weren't, or before that, but I mean, we're pretty well squared away.
In the, just one editorial comment. The rendering that Context gave for the potential building, I think they nailed it. I think they hit it right out of the park.
Yeah, it does look good.
I'm looking at a building that fits in with the neighborhood, fits in with the need. It's a lot bigger, but it doesn't tower over everything. Tracy and Martha pulled up pictures from the town hall from 1927, and it was just about that size and just about that.
It was the original Grange building.
Right. Oh, the original Grange building.
That
Yeah.
had a fire.
Was on that location.
So they lost the whole second floor and the whole towering roof of that structure. And the resultant is a leftover building. And so when people talk about the historic building, it's half of a historic building, or it's half of an old building, of historic.
I mean, it's a sentimental building.
Right, and for
It's
somebody
not-
that works in that
it's not-
sentimental cottage every day and has worked in that sentimental cottage for 30 years, it's not a good building. I mean, it might be beloved by the town, but if you have to be in there all day, every day, it's not a good building. And it's not conducive to efficiency, especially the lower level. The upper level you can live with, but especially the lower level. So to keep something with that character, but get everything the town needs, I think the architect did a great job. So, and that's just an editorial. You may disagree, and that's fine. So.
I mean, that gets to the point. What are you thinking for a handout, Tracy? I mean, normally we give out the articles and that's on the warrant. Are we still thinking of doing that handout, that 3-pager that Jeff had prepared?
We
does
could
that add-
certainly do that. We
Or
could
does that
certainly
add some
provide-
confusion at this point, where,
Well,
what's on that?
the idea is that we had a first study so people could see the large program and see the progress that was made, but unless you handhold them and stand next to them and explain it, it is kind of hard to get from which side of it, what are we doing here?
Right.
Because they just can't read, people don't look at plans and understand it.
Process it
Um,
the same?
This is, here's the site plan, here's the plan, here's the short form of the budget. What's missing is the rendering for people to take this and actually give them a view that's 2 pages.
That may be just all you
Yes, do
need,
that.
and
Yeah,
Okay.
and that,
Put the rendering on one side
I'll
and.
put the rendering on the back to
Okay.
replace the first study.
right,
yeah,
Take this on the front, and that's the handout. Everybody gets one piece of paper. And Jeff can stand up and say, okay, I'm gonna basically re-show you what's on the piece of paper handout that you have.
That makes
I'll
sense.
explain it.
being a two-step process, not everyone is going to be at town meeting, so.
Right.
I mean, I'll be there, my wife can't make it, and be able to bring that home, and certainly kicks around the kitchen table for a while, it helps on November ballot questions.
Everybody, or most everybody that goes to the town meeting will be focused and interested to have this
Now, this
in
is.
their hand and not just a quick slide.
So I think just from a management point at town meeting, I mean, it's certainly outside the parameters of the building committee, but how are you going to handle, what's the thought on questions? I mean, you could have a couple of dozen people, and everyone has the right to be heard, but everybody does too. I think sometimes what happens is, and I find it somewhat frustrating, you'll have, I'll get up and speak on a warrant article. I'm just using me as an example. And then 3 other people will speak, and then someone will want to offer a rebuttal. I mean, I think we're all entitled to be heard on each warrant article, but I don't think that gives us the right to become offering rebuttals and this and that. I think when you're at the mic, you have the right to make your case, say either for it or against it. And I just don't want this to get, where you get 3 people managing the whole meeting and there's 30 people waiting. It becomes a circus.
But I think you said it there, is people have a right to make their statement and their argument.
So that voice the support or.
And against, but this isn't a project meeting. It's a different set.
It's a yes, no vote, basically, and
Yeah, yes, and we've, for better or for worse, and for better, we've been very accommodating, at least I think I have tried in all the meetings to be very accommodating to anybody in the audience to speak or to bring something to the table and have that question and response. It has dragged out on numerous occasions that people get to the special town meeting and they're asking, again, questions that get it a couple times over.
it's easy at a meeting like this, we have a handful of people in the audience, to have more of a discussion. But at town meeting, we could have upwards of 300, 400 people at this town meeting. And there's gonna be a lot of questions, and
To Damon's point, having the questions thought about, having the questions pre-answered
right.
helps in having multiple people ask a sort of kind of similar question that has already been presented.
yeah.
Helps move that along.
I think, part of the reason that I wanted to have this meeting this morning was to lay out some of those questions, who would be answering them in a presentation format. So I think part of what I will do after reading the article is lay out who's gonna speak to each of the questions, and then say that the architect will answer questions about the structure afterwards, and people will have the opportunity to present their views. Because I think, as you said, everyone has that right. It's very important that we get everyone's input, but it's not a debate forum.
In other words, what I'm hearing is that people really need to have a formal statement of their points of interest and reference, because they're not gonna be getting up 4 or 5 times like has happened in the past.
Well, I mean, I think you have a warrant article, it's a yes or no question. You have the right to voice your view whether you support it, and if you do, why? And if you don't, why not? But then I think you've made your point, and it's other people to make their points.
So it behooves people to organize their thoughts a little bit before they say.
Well, I think it's the town moderator that should have some direction on where questions are going to be directed. If it's a technical question, it's going to be Jeff Shaw. If it's a financial question, it could be Tracy or Marshall. If it's solely a police question on what color lockup area we're gonna have, then we'll let the chief tell us what his favorite color is.
And that might be well stated by the town moderator in the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, I just think
He's ready to do
Yeah,
that.
met with Lisa Mead earlier last week, and they talked a lot about format and whether or not times should be put on, and so he'll ultimately, I think, decide how it will be structured, and I'm sure he'll, instruct everyone at the beginning of the meeting.
General, tax impact, how did we get here, questions, from the selectmen, anything super technical, that's why we have Mr. Shaw.
Right.
Because he'll be able to give us factual answers immediately, that's why we have him.
what other questions do we anticipate?
The only thing I can think of that really hasn't been brought up is there's no penalty for paying this down early as the years go on. If our financial situation, continues to be good as it is, we can,
Retire this early.
right, we can pay it down, and I think that's an important thing to mention.
The typical, you brought up standalone police station. The site doesn't work, it's a bad site. Building's gonna be too big. There's not enough parking. It's just too much money. I mean, those are the realm of questions, and you can ask those several different ways, but those are the questions we've been hearing again and again, and that we've actually worked to resolve or solve some of those in the current site plan. The reuse of the existing building, some people just have it in their mind that it's just cheaper because the building is there, that it's cheaper to reuse, and we don't have a definitive plan or study that points that out. We have some metrics, and we have Jeff speaking to that, but it seems to be brought up again and again. Just because it's physically there and somebody's inside it means that there is value, and at some point, yeah, in a residential market or in a commercial market, there is value for an existing structure on a piece of property, but that structure meeting the needs, fulfilling the needs for the next 40 years, 50 years, is where that falls apart. And the fact that, we had water, we brought sewer to the building, we extended water and sewer down to the end of the fire station, which helps the fire station out, and would help any future development on that far lot or across Morgan Ave if needed. And now, now we have water and sewer to the building, so the building's fine. We fixed the sewer issue. Well, I think still have the old stone foundation, we still have low ceilings, we still have a kind of a residential mechanical system in there.
Multi-generational wiring.
Multi-generational wiring.
Leaky roof.
And when we look to organize the town hall spaces as efficiently as possible, we're not laying out within the structure. And that also then kicks the addition outside the structure, so anybody who claimed that the town hall new eats up too much of the site and it's too big of a building on the site, the addition has always just been an appendage which eats up site as well on the existing town.
You will get a question on this cost is reaching the threshold of why don't we regionalize? And to me, that question gets kind of answered quickly as to, what kind of town do you want to be? Why is that going to be less expensive in the end? And do you want Newburyport picking our police chief and on and on and on and on and on and on? So I mean,
It's a good question. I always look at it that if you want to maintain the same staffing levels, our cost per patrolman, sergeant, lieutenant, and captain, and chief is cheaper than if Newburyport's, right? I mean, how many times, Mike, do we lose a good person because Newburyport has a slot and their pay grade is much higher than what we offer? So looking at it from that standpoint, that's how I kind of get over that whole discussion.
The second part of that question is, if we don't have the holding facilities now, why do we need new ones? And we've answered that in terms of the chief saying that, you know, you need to have an officer. You can put somebody in Newburyport cell, but you need to have an officer sitting there watching your prisoner. You can take somebody down to Middleton, but there's no shuttle bus from Middleton that comes around on a regular.
And I'd just like to say, God forbid I get arrested, I'd much rather be in town than shuffled to Middleton. I mean, just innocent or guilty, you know, say I'm innocent. I'd rather be in town than get
Under the
shipped
new
off.
regime with the sheriff's department, bringing prisoners down to Middleton is more difficult because their liability has increased exponentially too. And
So we're paying for an overtime officer to come in and babysit that.
either that or I'm taking an officer off the street and we're running shorthanded while that happens.
So we're deficient right now in our operations by the means of not having the program that we're requesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Just a comment that cuts a little higher in this discussion, and that is that every time we've gone through the master plan, this is what the town wants. So to ask that question, it's been answered in the master plan.
It was published in 2006.
Yeah. And so you don't have to go any deeper than that. This is what the town has asked for.
The master plan process puts out a questionnaire that seeks the response of all
Yes, it does.
residents.
But nonetheless, it will be one of those questions. I mean, I think, I'm proud of our town because what we've done is we've recognized, I think everyone globally agrees that we need to do something with the police station, we need to do something with the town hall. The question is, from a global standpoint, the most economical way is doing a combined facility. The hurdle is going to be overcoming the stepped approach where you do step one, a police station, step two, the town hall. So I think it's really kind of breaks down that simple for me. So dollars and cents usually sways me personally just because of our own impact. So I just don't want us to get too complex on this. We've made some great inroads in just being able to get that far. And how many years did we hear everything's fine just the way it is? So I mean, I think our town citizens recognize the need. It's just, how do we get them over the finish line that the combined facility is the most economical, most global approach with the lowest dollars today? And if they're not willing to make that leap at this point, what I don't want us to do is stagnate for another 2 years trying to repackage this. Come November, we should make a decision what we're going to do. We're either going to have this global approach, or we're back to the town is telling us they wanted a two-step approach. We build a police station, then you address the town hall as a second project. But inaction and letting interest rates go up for another 2 years is my biggest concern at this point.
The program's done.
Yeah.
The conceptual layout of spaces, whether you take this building that's combined or whether you do this, it's done.
Yeah.
And the numbers are the numbers, and you can add and detract a little bit, and you can forecast for additional funds that are needed. But the bottom line is that the program now, with the architect, with double checking from where we started, from context architect, from CSS architect, to context architect, to the chief's review, to the town hall's review, this is the program. It's going to look like this. It's going to look like this. It's going to look like this. This is the program, and I think that's where we realize as a committee that we're now at.
I think if it, for whatever reason, the project doesn't pass at town meeting or at the ballot, to come back with a different project, I think the program is the program. And I mean, we've vetted it to the point where this is what we need. Whether it passes or not doesn't change the fact that this is what we feel we need. So to come back with something different, I think, is doing a disservice to the voters because it just confuses them. You know, you said you needed this in 2018, but now it's May of 2019, you have something different. Well, what did you need then, or do you need it now? So I think once you vet the program, which we've done, and all of us have done a lot of work on that, I think to deviate from that program, I think that's bad. So I don't think we come back with a different project. If it fails for whatever reason, we might come back with a different iteration. Hey, the combined facility is over here as opposed to here, or, you know, the floor plan for both, the programming for both are in separate buildings. I don't know. That's up to the town. But as far as being the department head for the police station, my needs aren't going to change whether the vote passes or doesn't pass. I'm going to come back to you with the same program and say, this is what we need, and it's up to the voters.
No, I agree. The only difference is you have a standalone police station and it's done right away, and town hall is done at a later date at a punitive cost. I mean,
Okay.
Right.
that's what it's
up
going
to
to
the
come down
town.
to.
If I may. Okay. What you're talking about is changing a plan for poor communication. Okay? The job is get people out to vote. If it doesn't pass, you failed the communication part, not the planning part. Pay attention to what you failed and fix that. Because if it comes back and says, you know, as we have seen in the town, are you gonna get half the people voting? What about the half that don't? Are you going to get the people out to get this done? This is really where the rubber meets the road, folks. I mean, you've got a lot of interested people who know about this, have very strong feelings about this. Great. Now you have to attack the apathy.
And I think there's irony in the fact that way back when CSS and Eric were pounding over the numbers, the figures, and the drawings, that we're pretty much almost now where we were way back with CSS and you were. That's kind of ironical. So I think we've done a good job in really putting the best product out after tremendous effort, introspection, and tremendous amount of planning.
Any more?
No, I mean, I think we kicked this around good. I think it certainly it's the selectmen, you run town meeting, and I think you guys did a great format there. And the team will be around you to fill in. And are we meeting in the auditorium, or are we going into the gymnasium?
Gymnasium.
Just assuming that it's going to be a lot of trouble.
Okay.
No, I mean, that gets us what I wanted, which is a presentation format. And, you know, we can meet with the judge a little bit to explain what I intend to do, and as long as everyone knows sort of where they are, and, you know, everyone, I'm sure will want to get up and speak to it, but it's, I think, like I said, we got a format, so it's going from me to Jeff, to you, to Shaw,
Yeah.
to you, and finance.
I will print that out also short of the agenda so that the moderator can have that.
Yeah.
And he can understand and check as we're moving through the process and people are speaking, he's gauging time just by that. So he's not losing track that someone else was supposed to speak.
Yeah.
Because it'll be new to him unless we present it to him. So I'll make a short
Yes.
agenda for that.
Eric, you and I will get together a little bit too, maybe this weekend, so that I speak to the imaging that went through a chair of Board of Selectmen's mind, let's say, in the process, because you'll be more factual in your presentation so that we don't seem redundant.
Yeah, my process and history will be condensed from 2012 to 2016, but hopefully to 2 minutes or less, 3 minutes.
Short and sweet, answer questions, away you
Yep.
go.
Chief, anything?
No? Say.
Marshall?
No, well, I've got a presentation ready to go. We'll be working on it a little bit more this weekend. And
Great. Anybody else that's here that wants a word in or like to say something? No?
All right.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?